So our topic today is, what is the right definition of knowledge? And we've been discussing this for a little while before we started recording, and it is going to be, we have a lot of thoughts on what the right definition of knowledge.
It's going to be really, really tough to be concise about this sort of thing.
Yeah,
but we'll try.
We have a lot of thoughts. First, let's start with why the standard definition of knowledge, which is justified true belief, we reject as a good definition of knowledge. And I think you had a really good, concise reason with that before.
Well,
before that,
the thought process was really stemming from the justified part of it. If anyone's listened to our previous videos about justified or foundational knowledge, you'll kind of see where I'm going with this.
But it's always good to repeat. I find it always helps for people to, reinforce what they're saying. And
well,
so
justified
true belief is the foundation of knowledge since Plato, and that has been there for 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years, and we have not been able to shake at least some part of it from our psyche. It has been, the standard philosophical definition of knowledge, and we're two crazy people saying that isn't the way that it is. Why are we saying
we
this?
don't want to create our own language for anything. We're not trying to seek to redefine everything. So when we say this should be redefined, it isn't taken lightly. And there really has to be some major problem with the definition. There really isn't anything better than the word knowledge to describe this very real phenomenon. But we do think that justified true belief does a really bad job of representing that phenomenon
and describing how you know something. And really, I think this relates to the knowledge building process. But let's first talk about the traps of justified true belief. What are the pitfalls?
Justificationism, basically just trying to find justifications for things, leads us to a trap where you're forced to either indefinitely search for the ultimate justification, which is not ever going to exist, and that's an infinite regression, or it leads you to a circular argument where it really doesn't end either. You just keep going around and around in circles, never really settling. Or, lastly, it leads you to a sort of axiomatic foundation where you've basically just judged everything in there as being true, and it doesn't really prepare you for the possibility that you're wrong.
And so you defend very harshly what might be wrong and might be provably wrong.
Yeah, it leads to a lot of things. You're not prepared to deal with the possibility of being wrong. You're more emotionally invested. You've spent your whole life making these judgments and acquiring a big pile of facts, or whatever you deem them to be. And it would be a big mess if that pile of facts turned out to be a house of cards. And if it starts shaking, you're going to start feeling very anxious.
Yes. So
you might actually just deny the criticism. And nothing ever gets resolved.
So just emotionally, it can take its toll if you have picked a foundation that is proven wrong. You since you're emotionally invested because you feel like this is the foundation of your worldview, you are resistant to changing that idea. And from what we understand of knowledge is that we should be able to let go of ideas very quickly because we're often proven wrong. That, hard. We can never prove that we're right, so pretty much every proof is something is wrong.
Yeah. I mean, we're probably wrong about something. We could be mostly right about something too, and then still be wrong about some aspect of it.
Yes.
It would make sense to expect being wrong in some way about everything, even if you're mostly right about a lot of things. Expecting that you're wrong in some way just lets you get prepared for when you do learn that you're wrong.
I like the evolution of Newton's laws to general relativity to special relativity because each one of them has, and maybe this is just utilitarianism, but each one of them has a utility and has a purpose. You can understand each in a series, in a progression, and each one in their own given context make a lot of sense, right? Newton's laws make a lot of sense in their given context. General relativity makes a lot of sense in its given context, and special relativity makes a lot of sense in its given context. Just the fact that we have those different contexts mean that they're all useful bits of knowledge, even though each one of them, I don't know if special relativity has been proven wrong, but each of the other two have been proven wrong to be not the exact replication of reality.
Yeah, that's a good point. We have these two theories that can conflict with each other. Mm-hmm. We know there's a problem trying to take these two theories into one theory, mm-hmm. which we know that basically, since everything could be taken to be one model, one universal understanding, then everything is connected and at least explanatorily to other things. That we've got this eventually will be capable of arriving to a model, a single model. Now, it could be flawed or whatever, but that single model, if you take special relativity or general relativity and quantum mechanics in together, they conflict in the same model. And so resolving that would be a very messy thing if you're a foundationalist.
Right. It inherently means that our understanding as foundationalists is wrong, that our foundation is flawed, and we have no idea where it's flawed. That has to be concerning to if you believe in foundationalism. If you believe that justified true belief is the way, you have just in that instance proven your own foundation to be unjustified, or at least untrue, because they conflict.
Yeah. So justificationism, because of that trap that it sets for us, leads us to conclude that knowledge is unattainable. But we know that's not right. No, right? I'll try not to use the word no, because
we understand that to be false
anyway.
Right?
But we understand that to be false because there is something going on when we learn things.
That is evident by the theories we just mentioned. From Newton's laws to general relativity to special relativity. There is an example of progress. Each succeeding theories build on the previous and make them more cohesive. Right?
Yeah. So the question is, are we really attaining that up? Not through just sifting through all the guesses and judging them to be facts.
Right.
Or not. You know, if that's not what we're really doing, how do we obtain knowledge?
Right. So now we should move on to
and I think
our definition.
You want to answer that?
So how we gain knowledge is through how we build knowledge is through constrained guesswork, and we need to break that apart quite a bit. What we mean by that is it's very similar to the scientific method in that you observe something and you make a guess about what's happening. And when you make a guess about what's happening, you then find constraints that help that guess. I wouldn't say it doesn't support the guess, but you try to find ways to disprove that guess, and the more ways that you find not to disprove that guess, more meaningful ways you find that guess aligns with certain facts or explicanda, as you like to call them. The more that aligns, the better constrained that guess, and the more seriously you should take that guess. For example, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say better constrained guesses are better guesses.
Yes.
Not because they're more probable, more likely to be true, but because they're simply better guesses than a speculation.
Right.
So
you can speculate on anything. You can, and that means that we can have very unconstrained guesses. But when we have constraint, when it matches, there's a phrase that I like from legal terms, which is called a fact pattern. Right? They build a fact pattern, which is a series of facts that help identify that this story is correct. Right? And so constraint is very similar to a fact pattern. You have a series of things that you need to account for. And the more things that your explanation can account for, the better explanation it is.
The more constrained it is, the better the guess is. So you want an explanation that's really locked down because it's so broadly reaching, so deep in what it actually explains, that it would be very difficult to change the explanation without breaking that.
Right. That given the fact pattern that we have, or given that the information that we have available to us, it could almost be no other way that it could be this. Right. Gravity in and of itself on Earth is very constrained. We know we're fairly certain that gravity exists because if everyone throws an apple, it will all go down to the ground and hit the ground. If series after series of experiment, gravity, the rule of gravity has not been able to be disproven. And things like making it to space or going to the moon also help constrain it, because we understand it encompasses more and more things.
Yep, and that's another interesting feature of explanation that has a reach that goes beyond our experience, because we're basically in an attempt to describe what we've seen, we're going to make statements that apply to things we don't see. And as we live our lives, we're going to acquire new experiences that are either in line with that explanation or not. And if it's not, then we've just found a problem that needs solving. And if it is in line, it's more constraint. What I'm careful not to say is that more evidence yields more support, because that's not true. It doesn't mean the theory is more likely at all. It just means it's constrained and that guess is better, and we should be looking for better guesses.
Yeah. It's really an interesting way to look at things. And when you start seeing knowledge and building knowledge as that, you find that you are able to avoid a lot of the traps of foundationalism. much like
Yeah.
the idea that you must rely on evidence. Well, one of the problems with relying on evidentiary explanation is that you then have to understand your evidence so well that it's an infinite regression. And so, because of that, you end up, if somebody attacks you on your evidence,
It's very expensive.
right? If somebody attacks you on your evidence,
you're like, well, where's your evidence? Well, you cite this paper,
right?
And then what? They cite a bunch of papers.
And then who has the more papers,
and then
I guess?
They cite a bunch of papers. And we have a never-ending search for the ultimate paper, that
the ultimate
that
authority.
infinite regression.
Yeah.
Or we have a circular argument of papers citing each other papers. Or we just decide on what the truth is and just go with it arbitrarily.
Yeah.
Which doesn't, none of these gets us closer to understanding what's true. But if you look at the citations instead as a kind of constraining network, it changes everything. You're not using the citation to support you as an author of a paper. You're looking for these citations to help constrain your argument.
Right.
And it doesn't mean you're more likely to be true. It just means your argument is better for it.
Right.
It changes the perspective of what you're doing when you're looking for citations or justifications of things.
Right. Well, I think we've covered a good amount, and I think we could probably stop.
Yeah, I think so. I got no other points.
We summed it up really well, and I think we're gonna sign off with keep on solving problems and keep on building knowledge, and have a good night.
All right, take care.